I never imagined that my life would twist the way it has these past few months. Some days I still laugh alone when I think about how everything started. Me, a simple receptionist trying to keep my head above water, raising my son in a small apartment and doing my best not to fall apart every time the mailman brought another bill. I used to believe my life would always be a quiet routine. Take Han to daycare, rush to work, check people in, bring people coffee, smile when I didn't feel like smiling, come home, cook something simple, bathe my son, put him to sleep, and then collapse on the couch. Just the two of us against the world. But life has a strange way of surprising us in moments we least expect. I remember one morning in particular. I had spilled coffee on my blouse before even leaving the house. Johan was refusing to wear his shoes, and I had slept maybe 4 hours because he had crawled into my bed in the middle of the night, telling me he had dreamed of a giant talking carrot. So when I finally got to work, already exhausted and hoping no one would notice that my hair wouldn't cooperate that day, I didn't expect to catch the attention of anyone, much less the CEO of the company. I still remember the first time he said my name. Leonard. Even now, saying his name in my thoughts feels strange, almost too big for my life, too polished for my world. He walked into the lobby dressed in a navy suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. He didn't even have to try. He carried himself with a calm confidence that made everyone straighten their posture whenever he crossed the room. I was organizing delivery packages when he approached the counter, and when he said, "Good morning, Caroline," I looked behind me because I honestly thought he must have been talking to someone else. I had no idea he even knew my name, but apparently he did. He knew everyone's name actually, but the way he said mine felt different. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I was just tired. But I felt something shift inside me that day, and I hated that I felt it. Women like me don't get noticed by men like him. I knew that. I told myself that 1,000 times. I repeated it like a prayer so I wouldn't get caught up in something impossible. Still, the next day he passed by the front desk again, and the day after that, and then again, and again, until his visits started to feel familiar, routine, intentional. Sometimes he asked how my day was. Sometimes he made small comments about how busy the week had been. And sometimes he would stop, look at me for a second longer than necessary, and give me one of those half smiles that made my heart jump despite every warning siren screaming in my mind. I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself that he was just being polite. After all, I was a receptionist. He was the CEO. There are entire worlds between those two things. But it didn't stop. One Friday afternoon, I was sorting some documents when he approached me carrying a coffee. Not just any coffee. The one I always ordered from the shop across the street. I had never told him my favorite drink. I didn't even think he had ever paid attention when I held the cup in my hand. But there he was, placing it gently on the counter. "You look like you could use this," he said with a soft smile. I felt my cheeks warm. "You didn't have to." "I know," he replied, leaning just slightly against the counter. "But I wanted to." That was the first moment I felt something go out of place inside my chest, like a loose thread being pulled. I sensed danger, not the kind that scares you, but the kind you crave even while knowing you shouldn't. Days turned into weeks, and the conversations became more personal. He asked about my life. He learned about Johan. He listened when I talked about how hard it was being a single mother. He asked questions that made me feel seen, questions that men in my world never asked. I learned small things about him too. Things you wouldn't find in a magazine interview or corporate profile. I learned he liked to wake up early because he loved watching the city before it got loud. I learned he hated elevators but forced himself to use them anyway because it looked more professional. I learned he loved reading but rarely had time for it. And I learned that despite the expensive suits and the powerful title, he wasn't as unshakable as he seemed. And then there was the night. I didn't plan it. God knows I didn't. I had spent months resisting the idea of letting him get close to me, too close. I didn't want trouble at work, I didn't want gossip, and I definitely didn't want my heart broken. But the more I tried to keep distance, the more he found ways to shorten it. It happened on a Thursday. I had stayed late, trying to finish some leftover tasks after the office slowed down. I wasn't expecting to see him there, but he appeared near the reception desk with his jacket slung over his arm, his hair slightly messy, something I had never seen before. He looked tired, human, and my heart softened in a way I wish it hadn't. "You're still here?" he asked, sounding surprised. "I had some things to finish," I replied. And it's easier when the office is empty. He nodded, walked a few steps closer, then stopped like he didn't know what to do with himself. His eyes drifted to my face, my hands, my small pile of unfinished papers. "Caroline, can I ask you something?" he said quietly. I swallowed. "Of course. Do you ever feel like everything you do still isn't enough?" And suddenly, the powerful CEO looked more like a lost man asking the universe for a break. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped closer to him, so close I could see a tiny scar above his eyebrow that I had never noticed. "I feel like that all the time," I whispered. Something in him cracked then. Maybe something in me cracked too, because the next second, he closed the distance between us and kissed me like he had been trying not to for months. I wish I could say I pushed him away, that I remembered my job, my responsibilities, my fear. But I didn't. I kissed him back like I was starving, like I had forgotten what it felt like to be touched by someone who genuinely wanted me. We barely made it through the door of my apartment that night. And when Johan woke up half asleep, rubbing his eyes, I told him Mommy had a friend visiting and that he should go back to bed. Thankfully, he didn't question it and was too tired to notice anything else. Leonard stayed. He stayed the whole night. It felt unreal watching him sleep in my small bed. His expensive shirt folded neatly on my chair. His watch resting beside my lamp. For the first time in years, I fell asleep with someone's warm breath against my neck. And I let myself pretend just for a few hours that this was normal, that this could be real. And then came the morning. The sunlight came through the curtain, soft and golden. I woke up before Leonard and spent a moment watching him with a strange mixture of disbelief and fear. What did this mean? Was this a mistake? Would he regret everything? Would I? I got up quietly, trying not to wake him, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Johan was still asleep, tangled in his blanket as usual. I made coffee, scrambled eggs, and 2 slices of toast, nothing special. My hands were shaking a little, and I had to keep telling myself to breathe. A few minutes later, Leonard joined me in the kitchen, wearing his shirt but not completely buttoned, still looking half dreamy. He sat at the table and smiled at me. One of those warm, tender smiles that made me forget the world. "Good morning," he said softly. "Morning," I whispered, feeling my cheeks warm. We were drinking coffee when Johan came out of his room. His curls were messy, his pajamas slightly twisted on his small body, and he walked with that sleepy wobble that always melted my heart. He rubbed his eyes and looked first at me, then at Leonard. And then it happened. He stared at Leonard for a long moment, his head tilted to the side, studying him as if trying to understand how someone like him had appeared in our kitchen. Then he turned to me and asked, with his small innocent voice, "Mommy, who is that important boy who slept here last night?" I froze. The cup almost slipped from my hands. My heart started pounding so loud I thought Leonard could hear it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I should say. I could feel my face turning red. Leonard looked at me, surprised, almost amused, but also a little uncertain. "Well," I began, but my voice cracked. He's just a friend, sweetheart." Johan frowned. "But he's important," he insisted. "He's dressed like important people." I tried to laugh, but the sound came out shaky. "He just likes to dress nice, honey." Johan walked closer to Leonard and inspected him with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can have. Then he whispered loudly to me, "Is he gonna stay for lunch?" Important people always stay for lunch. I didn't know where to hide my face. I wanted to sink into the floor. Leonard smiled gently, but I could see in his eyes that he understood how complicated this was for me. I didn't want Johan to get attached to someone who might not stay. I didn't want to break his heart or mine. Leonard leaned slightly toward Johan and said, "I'm honored you think I'm important, buddy." Johan blinked, then nodded as if giving him approval. My embarrassment was overwhelming, but beneath it, something else trembled inside me, fear. The type of fear that comes when you realize you're in deeper than you meant to be. Deeper than you should be. I didn't know what Leonard would think now. I didn't know if he'd see my life as too messy, too complicated, too real. And as I watched him finish his coffee beside my son, I felt a knot form in my chest. A knot made of hope and terror at the same time. Would this morning change everything? Would it ruin everything? Or could it be the beginning of something I never believed I deserved? I didn't know yet. and that uncertainty scared me more than anything. I didn't know what to do with myself after Johan's question. I pretended to focus on the scrambled eggs, but my fingers were trembling, and I could feel the tension in the air wrapping around my shoulders like a heavy blanket. My kitchen suddenly felt too small, too intimate, as if the walls themselves were listening. Leonard looked comfortable enough, calm, composed, but there was a spark of uncertainty in his eyes that he tried to hide by sipping his coffee. Meanwhile, my heart felt like it wanted to climb out of my chest and run away. Johan hopped onto his little chair, swinging his legs under the table. He looked at Leonard like he was some character from his cartoons who had suddenly stepped out of the screen and into our home. Kids had this way of seeing through everything. They didn't need explanations. They just sensed energy, connection, intention. And Johan clearly saw something I didn't want him to see yet. "Mommy," he said, pointing at Leonard's shirt. "Why does he have shiny buttons? Are shiny buttons for important boys?" Leonard chuckled softly, but I could tell he was trying to respect my space, trying not to interfere. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Sweetheart, it's just how his clothes are made." Johan didn't look convinced. Children rarely are when they feel they've uncovered something. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, something I always told him not to do, and whispered loudly, "Mommy, did the important boy get scared of the monsters last night? Is that why he slept here?" My face burned. "Johan," I exclaimed, almost choking on my coffee. "He didn't. There were no monsters. He was just visiting." Leonard covered his mouth to hide his laugh, and somehow that made the embarrassment even worse. Or better. I couldn't decide. I stole a glance at him. His hair was still slightly messy from the night, his shirt halfway buttoned, his tie draped on the back of the chair I'd used to stack bills and school papers. The image of him sitting there in my tiny kitchen, next to the fridge covered in Johan's crayon drawings and alphabet magnets, it felt surreal. How could someone like him fit into a place like this? Or into a life like mine? As I watched them both share the same table, a strange ache settled in my chest. I had kept my world so separate from everything else, so guarded, so carefully protected. But now the two halves of my life, the one defined by struggle and routine, and the one defined by longing and possibility, were sitting side by side. And I didn't know if they belonged together. After breakfast, Johan ran off to the living room to play with his toy cars, humming a little tune. I could hear the wheels scraping on the floor. His innocence made everything feel heavier, more real. Leonard stood up, bringing his cup to the sink. "You don't have to," I started, but he shook his head. "I want to," he said, rinsing it. I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter, unsure of what to say or how to look at him without my stomach flipping over. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His back was turned to me, but even then I could feel something warm between us, something fragile, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. When he finally faced me, he looked softer than I'd ever seen him. There wasn't any trace of the CEO anymore. No commanding presence. Just a man standing in my kitchen trying to read my heart. "Caroline," he said carefully, "I hope you're not upset about what happened this morning." "I'm not upset," I whispered, though my voice betrayed my nerves. "Just embarrassed." He took a few slow steps toward me. "He's a smart kid. And he adores you. Anyone can see that." I pressed my lips together. "That's the problem." He frowned gently. "How so?" "He's 5, Leonard. He gets attached easily. And I don't want him to get confused." I struggled to breathe normally. "And I don't want him to get hurt." Leonard lowered his gaze. For a moment he seemed deep in thought, almost troubled. "I don't want to hurt him," he said after a moment. "And I don't want to hurt you." His tone was sincere, so sincere it scared me. I hugged my own arms tighter. "This, whatever we're doing, it's complicated." He nodded. "I know. And we work together." "I know that too. And you're my boss." "I'm painfully aware." I almost laughed despite myself. He was trying to lighten the tension, but there was no denying the truth. Everything about us came with warning signs. "But last night," he added slowly, "last night didn't feel like a mistake. I felt my knees weaken just a little." "No," I admitted softly. "It didn't." Johan shouted from the living room. "Mommy, my car is stuck under the couch." I held up a finger toward him. Just a minute, sweetheart. Leonard looked toward the living room, then back at me, his tone shifting to something almost tender. You're an incredible mother, you know. I blinked in surprise. What? The way you talk to him. The patience you have. The way he looks at you. He gave a small smile. He feels safe with you. That's rare. And beautiful. My throat tightened unexpectedly. It had been so long since anyone had noticed the effort behind my exhaustion. So long since anyone had appreciated the weight I carried alone. I looked down. I don't know what I'm doing most days, I murmured. No one does, he said. Not really. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and his jaw tightened. A tiny shift in his expression told me the message was important, urgent. He hesitated before picking it up. I have to take this, he said apologetically. It's from the board. I nodded. Work. Work, he repeated quietly, but with a tone that said he wished it wasn't. He stepped into the hallway to answer it, and for the first time since waking up, I let myself exhale. I leaned on the counter, covering my face with my hands. Everything felt too fast, too overwhelming. I heard him speaking quietly, firm, controlled, the CO tone slipping back into his voice. A reminder of the world he belonged to, a world where I didn't fit. When he returned, his expression had changed. The softness was still there, but now it was wrapped in responsibility. I have to go, he said with regret. There's an issue with the expansion contracts. I nodded, trying not to appear disappointed. Of course. I understand. He looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for something in my face. Something that could answer questions neither of us dared to ask out loud. He approached slowly, then leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on my cheek. My skin burned where his lips touched. Thank you for last night, he whispered. And for this morning. Even the embarrassing part. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could find any words, Johan came running into the kitchen. Are you leaving, important boy? He asked. Leonard crouched down to his height. I am, but I hope I'll see you again. Tomorrow, Johan asked immediately. Leonard glanced at me. That small pause, barely a fraction of a second, felt like the longest moment of the morning. My stomach twisted. Then he smiled at Johan. We'll see. My heart sank and fluttered at the same time. After he stood up, he gave me one last look, one that I felt all the way to my bones. A look that said everything and nothing. Then he left. When the door closed behind him, the apartment seemed painfully quiet. I walked to the window and watched him get into his car. He didn't look back. Maybe he didn't want to. Maybe he wanted to but didn't dare. Johan tugged at my pajama pants. Mommy? Will the important boy come back? I knelt beside him, brushing his curls from his forehead. I don't know, sweetheart, I said softly. I really don't know. And that was the truth. The next few days were a blur. Work felt different. The building seemed bigger, the lobby colder. I kept expecting him to pass by the desk like he always did, to give me one of his half smiles, to say good morning, to ask how I was. But he didn't. He kept his distance. Maybe because he didn't know how to face me after everything. Maybe because he was busy. Maybe because he regretted getting involved. Maybe because he didn't want rumors. Maybe because he was scared. Or maybe I was scared. Every time I saw him from a distance, in the elevator, in a meeting room, talking to someone in the hallway, my heart sped up and then crashed. We exchanged polite nods, nothing more. My chest tightened each time. Had I misread everything? Had the night meant more to me than it did to him? But then something changed. A week after that morning, I was sorting mail near the front desk when he approached quietly. My heart jumped before I even saw him. He stood closer than usual, close enough for me to smell the faint citrus scent of his cologne. Caroline, he said softly, careful, as if the word itself might shatter. I looked up. Yes. His eyes searched mine with a kind of vulnerability I hadn't expected. Can we talk? He asked. Not here. After your shift. My breath caught. About what? About us, he said. The world tilted. Leonard, Please, he interrupted gently. Just talk. There was something in his tone that made it impossible to refuse. Something honest. Something real. After my shift, we met outside near the small garden by the entrance. It was cold, so I wrapped my arms around myself. He noticed and took off his jacket, placing it around my shoulders without saying a word. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled as if releasing a weight. "I've been trying to figure out what to do," he confessed. "I've been going back and forth in my head, trying to separate what's logical from what I feel." I swallowed. "And I can't stop thinking about you." His voice was quiet, almost fragile. Not the CEO. Not the man everyone feared and respected. Just Leonard. "And I can't stop thinking about that morning," he added. Not in a bad way. In a hopeful way. Hopeful. The word felt dangerous. I shook my head slightly. "Leonard, my life is complicated. I have a child. Responsibilities. I can't afford to get lost in something uncertain." "I don't want to be uncertain," he said. "I just don't know how to do this right." "Neither do I." We stood in silence for a long moment. Cars passed by, people walked in and out of the building, and yet somehow the world felt distant, as if we were suspended in a moment that wasn't fully ours to claim. He stepped closer. "I want to try, but only if you want to." My heart twisted in every direction. "I'm scared," I whispered. "So am I." He reached for my hand, hesitated, then gently held it. "We don't have to rush anything," he said. "We don't have to define anything. We can go slow. But I don't want to pretend nothing is happening." I looked at our hands together, his warm mind trembling. "Leonard," I whispered, "what if this ruins everything?" He gave a soft, sad smile. "What if it doesn't?" My chest tightened with something almost painful. Hope, fear, desire, longing, everything tangled together. I didn't give him an answer. I couldn't. My heart was too loud, my thoughts too messy, my future too uncertain. He squeezed my hand gently. "I'll wait," he said simply. "As long as you need." Before I could react, someone called his name from the entrance. An assistant. He gave me one last glance, one that lingered a second too long, then stepped away. I watched him walk back into the building. This time he did look back, and I felt something inside me shift and break open. That night, after putting Johan to sleep, I sat alone on the couch with the lights off, staring at the ceiling. Everything felt heavier in the dark, realer. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if Leonard and I had a future, or if this would fade like a dream we both wake up from too soon. I didn't know if I should open my heart or protect it. I didn't know which path would hurt less, or which one might finally bring me something good. But one thing was certain. That morning, when my son asked who the important boy was, he had no idea how right he was. And maybe the truth was that I didn't know it either. Not yet, but I was starting to learn. And no matter how frightening the unknown felt, part of me wondered, quietly, secretly, what might happen if I finally stopped running from it? Only time would tell. Only courage would decide. And only my heart could choose whether that important boy was meant to stay, or just pass through my life like a beautiful storm. Whatever comes next, I guess I'll find out.